That man looked at me like I was nothing. Standing in that fancy boutique, he laughed and said I'd never be good enough to turn heads. But 3 months later, when I walked into his office as the woman who could save or destroy his empire, his face went white. Before we get into this story, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because I promise you, this is one story you won't see coming. And if you've ever been underestimated, stick around. This one's for you. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. It was a Saturday afternoon in downtown Chicago, and I was doing something I rarely did, shopping for myself. My name is Lauren, and at 32 years old, I'd spent the better part of a decade building a career in pharmaceutical research. I had a PhD from Northwestern, a position as lead researcher at a respected lab, and an 8-year-old son named Tyler, who was my entire world. Between work and motherhood, fancy shopping trips weren't exactly on my calendar, but this time was different. There was a gala coming up, the annual Medical Innovation Summit, and I was presenting my research. This was the moment I'd been working toward for years, and I wanted to feel confident, powerful, ready. So there I was, in this upscale boutique on Michigan Avenue, running my fingers along a rack of evening gowns. The place was beautiful, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, the kind of store where they served champagne while you shopped. I'll be honest, I felt a little out of place in my jeans and sweater, my natural hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. But I belonged there just as much as anyone else, and I was ready to invest in something special. That's when he walked in. Bradley Morrison. I didn't know his name yet, but I'd learn it soon enough. He was maybe in his early 40s, tall, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and he had this air about him, this entitlement that filled the room before he even opened his mouth. He had a woman with him, Vanessa, draped in designer everything, her laugh sharp and performative. The sales staff practically tripped over themselves to greet them, all smiles and eager attention. I kept browsing, trying on a deep burgundy dress that caught my eye. I was checking myself in the mirror, imagining how it would look at the gala, when I stepped backward and accidentally bumped into someone. I turned immediately, ready to apologize. It was Bradley. He looked down at me, and I saw his expression shift from surprise to something else, something cold. "Excuse me," I said politely, stepping aside. He brushed off his jacket sleeve like I'd contaminated him. "You need to watch where you're going," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Vanessa appeared beside him, looking me up and down with barely concealed mockery. "I'm sorry," I repeated, feeling my cheeks flush. "I didn't see you there." Bradley smirked, exchanging a look with Vanessa. "Clearly." Then he turned to the sales associate hovering nearby. "Maybe you should have a section for different clientele. Some of us are actually here to make serious purchases." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there frozen as he continued. "I mean, look at her. Shopping for what? A church social?" Vanessa laughed, that cruel, tinkling sound that made my stomach turn. Bradley wasn't done. He looked me directly in the eyes and said, "Women like you will never impress anyone who matters. You can put on whatever dress you want, but we all see what's underneath." The boutique went silent. The sales staff looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to defend me. After all, Bradley was clearly the big spender, the VIP customer. I was just someone who wandered in off the street. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, to tell him exactly who I was and what I'd accomplished. But my throat felt tight, and my eyes were burning with tears I refused to let fall. Not there, not in front of him. So I did the only thing I could do with dignity intact. I carefully placed the burgundy dress back on the rack, grabbed my purse, and walked out of that boutique with my head high. But the second I got to my car, I broke down. I sat in the parking garage and cried, letting out all the humiliation and anger I'd been holding in. I called my mama, and she listened while I sobbed, telling me what she always told me. "Baby, people like that are miserable inside. Don't you let his poison become yours." But it was hard. That night, I almost didn't want to go to the gala anymore. I looked at myself in the mirror and heard his words echoing, "You'll never impress anyone who matters." For a moment, just a moment, I believed him. Then Tyler came into my room, saw my face, and hugged me tight. "Mommy, why are you sad?" I couldn't tell my 8-year-old son about what had happened, so I just held him close and remembered why I did any of this. I remembered my father, who'd passed when I was in college, and his constant words of encouragement. Never let anyone make you smaller. I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let some arrogant stranger steal my moment. So I went to another boutique, found a stunning navy gown that made me feel like royalty, and I showed up at that gala ready to change my life. And that's exactly what happened. My presentation on non-opioid pain management research brought the room to its feet. I'd spent 5 years developing this drug, something that could help millions of people suffering from chronic pain without the risk of addiction. The science was solid, the trial results were incredible, and everyone in that room knew they were witnessing something special. After my presentation, I was surrounded by investors, pharmaceutical executives, research directors. Everyone wanted to talk to me, to learn more, to get involved. That's when I met Gregory Winters, a billionaire pharmaceutical investor with a reputation for backing revolutionary medical innovations. He pulled me aside and made me an offer I never saw coming. He wanted to fund my research independently, help me start my own company, take this drug all the way to market. But it meant leaving the security of my lab position, stepping out on faith with a young son depending on me. I went home that night and thought about it for hours. I talked to my mother, who told me she'd help with Tyler however I needed. I thought about my father, about the example I wanted to set for my son. And I thought about Bradley, about his cruel words, about how he'd tried to make me feel worthless. Something shifted in me then. His cruelty became fuel. I decided to take the leap. The next 3 months were a whirlwind. I left my lab position and founded Harrison Medical Innovations, named after my father. I assembled a small but brilliant team of researchers. We secured patents, refined the drug formulation, and pushed it through initial trials. The results were even better than we'd hoped. This wasn't just good science. This was life-changing medicine. The media started paying attention. Forbes ran a profile on me. The Chicago Tribune called me a rising star in pharmaceutical innovation. My company's valuation went from nothing to tens of millions seemingly overnight. Suddenly, major pharmaceutical companies were calling, wanting to partner with me or buy me out completely. I was selective, though. I didn't want to just get rich and disappear. I wanted to make sure this drug actually reached the people who needed it, that it would be affordable, that it would genuinely help communities struggling with pain management and opioid addiction. This was bigger than money. This was my purpose. As my company grew, we needed a proper headquarters, something beyond the small office space we'd been renting. My business partner Tasha, a brilliant lawyer who'd believed in me from the beginning, started setting up meetings with commercial property developers around Chicago. One of the companies on our list was Morrison Properties. I didn't recognize the name. I had no idea that Bradley owned it, that his family's real estate empire was struggling, that he was desperately trying to pivot into healthcare investments to save his failing business. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at Morrison Properties' downtown office. I dressed carefully that day, a tailored charcoal suit, my natural hair styled in an elegant updo, minimal jewelry, but expensive. I looked successful because I was successful. I looked powerful because I'd earned that power. Tasha and I arrived exactly on time, professional and prepared. The conference room was impressive, all glass walls and leather chairs, overlooking the Chicago skyline. We sat down and waited. Then the door opened, and Bradley walked in. He was already talking, confident and smooth, launching into his pitch about why Morrison Properties was the perfect partner for an innovative company like mine. He didn't look at my face at first, just gestured broadly, smiled that practiced smile, tossed around numbers and promises. Then our eyes met. I watched the recognition hit him in real time. His face went pale. He stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open slightly. He blinked, looked away, looked back. I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out if I was really who he thought I was. The woman from the boutique, the woman he'd humiliated, the woman he'd said would never impress anyone who matters. I remained perfectly composed, my expression neutral and professional. "Please, continue," I said calmly. "You were telling us about your portfolio." Bradley stammered, trying to recover. Yes, our portfolio." He shuffled his papers, cleared his throat. He kept glancing at me, looking for some sign that I recognized him too, but I gave him nothing. I just listened politely as he stumbled through his presentation, his confidence completely shattered. Tasha slid a folder across the table to me. We'd done our research on every developer we were considering, and Morrison Properties had some serious red flags, multiple lawsuits from previous clients, financial troubles that were barely hidden, a reputation for overpromising and under-delivering. I opened the folder and began reading while Bradley talked, and I could see him sweating, realizing that I knew exactly how unstable his company was. When he finished his pitch, I asked pointed questions. Questions about the lawsuits, questions about his company's financial stability, questions about timelines and guarantees. Every question exposed another weakness, another reason why my thriving company should look elsewhere. Bradley tried to deflect, to make excuses, but he was floundering. This meeting was his company's lifeline, and he could feel it slipping away. Finally, he changed tactics. He became almost pleading. "Ms. Harrison, I want you to know that Morrison Properties would consider it an honor to partner with you. I understand we've had some challenges, but we're committed to turning things around. Your company represents exactly the kind of innovation and excellence we want to align ourselves with." I let the silence stretch out. Then I spoke quietly. "Have we met before, Mr. Morrison?" His face flushed. I'm not sure. Because you seem familiar to me," I continued, my voice steady. "Though perhaps you don't remember everyone you encounter." He knew he was caught. I could see him debating whether to acknowledge it or keep pretending. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I think, perhaps, there was a chance meeting some months ago, at a boutique." "Ah, yes," I said, nodding slowly. "The boutique. Where you told me that women like me would never impress anyone who matters, that we all see what's underneath no matter what dress I wore." Tasha's eyes widened. She hadn't known about this. Bradley looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. He started babbling, words tumbling over each other. "I was having a terrible day. That's not who I am. Vanessa, my girlfriend at the time, she brought out the worst in me. I'm not with her anymore. I would never, I deeply regret." I held up my hand, and he fell silent. I took a breath, gathering my thoughts, deciding how I wanted to handle this moment I'd unknowingly been heading toward for 3 months. When I spoke, my voice was calm but firm. "Mr. Morrison, I want to tell you something. That day in the boutique, after you humiliated me, I sat in my car and cried. I went home and almost didn't go to the gala I'd been preparing for, the event where I was presenting years of research that could help millions of people. You made me doubt myself, my worth, my place in spaces I'd earned the right to be in. I almost let your cruelty steal my moment." Bradley looked down at his hands, shame written across his face. "But then I made a choice," I continued. "I chose to let your words fuel me instead of break me. Every late night in the lab, every obstacle, every moment I wanted to give up, I remembered what you said, and I proved you wrong. Not to you, but to myself. I built something extraordinary. I became someone extraordinary. Not because of money or status, but because I never forgot my worth, even when you tried to convince me I had none." I stood up, and Tasha followed my lead. I looked Bradley directly in the eyes. "I don't do business with people who don't see the humanity in others. Your company's financial troubles aren't why I'm walking away. Your character is. You were right about one thing, though. We do see what's underneath, and what's underneath your expensive suits and fancy office is someone who measures people's worth by their appearance and circumstances. That's not someone I want to build anything with." I picked up my briefcase and headed for the door. Behind me, Bradley stood abruptly. "Ms. Harrison, please, I'm begging you. This partnership could save my company. I'll give you reduced rates, equity stakes, anything you want. I'm truly sorry for what I said. Please." I paused at the door and turned back one last time. Mr. Morrison, you told me I'd never impress anyone who matters, but here's what I've learned. You'll never impress anyone who matters, not because of your bank account or your properties or your last name, but because of your character. That's something no amount of money can fix. And then I left. Tasha and I walked to the elevator in silence. When the doors closed, she looked at me with something like awe. "That was incredible," she whispered. I just nodded, feeling lighter than I had in months. It wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity, about knowing my worth and not compromising it for anything. We signed with a different developer the following week, a minority-owned business with a solid reputation and values that aligned with ours. My company continued to thrive. 6 months later, Harrison Medical Innovations went public, and I became a multimillionaire. More importantly, the drug launched and started changing lives, offering hope to people who'd been suffering for years. I established a scholarship fund for young Black women pursuing STEM degrees, determined to open doors that had been closed to others. I saw the news about Morrison Properties filing for bankruptcy, and I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just relief that maybe Bradley's cycle of cruelty would end, that maybe he'd learned something from losing everything. A year after that boutique encounter, I did something unexpected. I bought that store, the same boutique where Bradley had humiliated me. I restructured it completely, hired diverse staff, implemented training on treating every customer with dignity and respect, regardless of how they looked or what they wore. On opening day, I brought Tyler with me. We stood in the middle of that beautiful space, and I told him the whole story, about the mean man, about the cruel words, about how I almost let it destroy my confidence. "But Mommy," Tyler said, confused, "you're amazing. How could you not know that?" I knelt down and looked into my son's eyes. "Baby, sometimes the world tries to tell us we're not enough. Sometimes people are cruel because they're hurting inside, but you never, ever let anyone make you feel small. And just as important, you never make anyone else feel that way either. We lift people up. That's how we change the world." Looking back now, I realized that Bradley did me a favor, though he never meant to. His cruelty revealed something I needed to see, that my worth was never dependent on anyone else's opinion, that the only voice that mattered was my own and the voices of the people I loved and respected. His words could have broken me, but instead they forged me into something stronger. I learned that revenge isn't about destroying the people who hurt you. It's about building a life so beautiful, so purposeful, so full of meaning that their cruelty becomes irrelevant. It's about succeeding not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right, to validate the truth you always knew deep down, that you were worthy all along. So that's my story. The man who tried to make me feel worthless ended up watching me become priceless, not because of money, but because I never forgot my worth. If this story touched you, or if you've ever been counted out and came back stronger, leave a comment below. I read every single one. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because I've got more stories that'll remind you your beginning doesn't determine your ending. Until next time, remember, they can mock you today, but they can't stop your tomorrow. Peace.